Why is listening to sex workers so hard? The anti-trafficking movement has faced significant criticism over the years, and for good reason. The reliance on law enforcement's arrest and sorted-out-later approach to exploitation is riddled with systemic flaws. Rooted in biases, inequalities, and a lack of trauma-informed care. This strategy often exacerbates harm rather than offering solutions. Instead of addressing the needs of survivors and sex workers, it perpetuates cycles of poverty, criminalization, and marginalization, leaving the very individuals it claims to protect even more vulnerable. Law enforcement's uneasy relationship with the idea that sex work is work and its inability to distinguish sex work from trafficking are deeply entrenched in a history of criminalization and moral policing. Since the 19th and early 20th centuries, sex work has been viewed as a moral failing tied to public decency. These early laws disproportionately targeted marginalized groups, poor women, women of color, LGBTQ+ individuals and immigrants, and positioned sex workers as threats to societal norms. This legacy persists today, with law enforcement often conflating consensual sex work with trafficking and employing harmful tactics that undermine the autonomy of those they aim to help. Many police agencies rely on outdated training and abolitionist narratives that blur the lines between sex work and trafficking. Operations like undercover stings and end-demand initiatives indiscriminately target both buyers and sellers, ignoring the complexities of the issue. Additionally, law enforcement often leans on flawed or inflated statistics to justify their actions, perpetuating the idea that arrest and coercion are effective tools for rescue. These methods fail to acknowledge the agency of sex workers and re-traumatize survivors of trafficking, leaving both groups more isolated and vulnerable. The consequences of this approach are dire. Criminalization discourages sex workers from reporting violence or exploitation, fearing harassment, arrest, or being dismissed by law enforcement. Survivors of trafficking often face similar mistrust and re-traumatization, with their unique needs like safe housing, trauma-informed care, and legal protections overlooked in a system that treats them as either criminals or passive victims. Harmful enforcement practices also lead to collateral damage, such as eviction, loss of custody of children, and barriers to employment due to criminal records. To create meaningful change, the anti-trafficking movement must shift toward harm reduction and survivor-centered solutions. This begins with listening to lived experiences. Sex workers and survivors of trafficking have invaluable insights into the systems that affect them. Their voices must guide the creation of policies and programs, ensuring relevance and efficacy. Engagement must go beyond tokenism, treating individuals as active participants in decision-making processes and respecting their autonomy and agency. Building trust through transparency is critical. Open, honest communication about goals and actions fosters credibility and ensures commitments are honored. Collaboration among sex workers, survivors, grassroots organizations, and anti-trafficking groups ensures inclusive partnerships, balancing power dynamics so that institutional voices do not overshadow those most affected. A harm reduction approach minimizes negative impacts and prioritizes access to essential resources such as healthcare, legal aid, and housing. These services should be shaped by the input of those they aim to serve. At the same time, systemic advocacy must address root causes like poverty, gender inequality, and immigration policies, ensuring laws and regulations are equitable and just. Ultimately, continuous feedback and evaluation are necessary to keep initiatives responsive and effective. Regular input from sex workers and survivors allows programs to adapt to their evolving needs, ensuring sustainable and impactful outcomes. Now is the time for collaboration. If we want to create systems that truly address the complexities of trafficking and exploitation, we must work together, sex workers, survivors, and organizations alike. By prioritizing lived experiences, fostering inclusive partnerships, and advocating for systemic change, we can build a future where dignity, agency, and respect are at the core of our efforts. Let's listen, learn, and act together.